Hi guys, welcome back to Spelling and Word Study. My name is Mrs. Rhoades and I'm here to get you started on Unit 21, the schwa sound. Please take a second to gather your materials. You will need your orange book, open to page 131. You will also need some colorful pens, markers, or crayons. Remember, whatever I mark on my board, you should be marking on your page. Please save room for a key as well. If at any point I'm moving too fast, please pause the video and catch up. All right, so we have officially ended our discussion of long vowels. We talked about long A, E, I, O, and U. We talked about different ways to make a long vowel, using an open syllable, using a silent E, or using a vowel team. So now we're moving on to some other types of vowels. And for the next few weeks, we're just going to call them advanced vowels, okay? These are a little more fancy, a little more sophisticated. Once you master your short vowels and your long vowels, you're ready for these. So we can't talk about bigger words without talking about the schwa. The schwa sound is the or I sound that shows up in an unstressed syllable. So we're going to talk about that more in a second, but first I want to read the list with you. Please repeat after me, and as we do, I want you to listen for that sound or I sound in each word. Here we go. Bulge, collapse, collide, combine, compete, complete, contain, contrast, contrast. Notice I wrote this word twice because it has two different pronunciations, contrast and contrast, control, convince, insult and insult, pulse, result, and should have. Did you hear that sound, that schwa in each word? Great. So what I want you to do now is I want you to choose a color, and for all of our words that are two syllables, we're going to break them into syllables. Okay? So bulge we'll leave alone because that's one syllable. Collapse, we're going to slice it between the double L's. Collide, between the double L's. Combine, after the M, compete, after the M, complete, after the M, contain, after the N, contrast, after the N, contrast, slicing it in the same place after the N, control, convince. For could've, I'm going to slice it right before that apostrophe. Insult and insult, in both cases I'm slicing it after the N. Pulse is one syllable. Result after the E, and should've after the D. So in my key, wherever I drew that pink line, that represents a syllable break. Now, we've done this once before. We've talked about our stressed versus unstressed syllables. So the stressed syllable is the part of the word that we say a little bit louder and a little bit stronger. So in collapse, it's the second syllable. Same thing with collide, combine, compete, complete, and contain. Notice all of these words start with a prefix. The prefix is very rarely stressed. It's usually the part of the word that comes after. Contrast, it's the second syllable. But contrast is the first syllable. Control, convince, could've, insult, insult. Okay, so depending on how we're using the word, if we're using it as a verb, we stress the second syllable. If we're using it as a noun, we stress the first syllable. Pulse is one. Result and should have. Okay, so over here, green check mark represents the stressed syllable. That's the part that we say a little bit louder and stronger. We also say that part more clearly, which means it's easier to hear the consonant sounds and the vowel sounds. The vowel sounds usually make the sound that we would expect. So the A sounds like an A, the E sounds like an E. But when we get to our unstressed syllables, that's where we develop kind of a lazy tongue. We don't put as much effort into that, and so all of our vowels kind of morph into this sound. So let me show you what I mean. In two-syllable words, we see it here, collapse. See how that O doesn't sound like call, it sounds like cull, So collapse, collide, combine, compete, complete, contain, contrast. In all of those words, our beginning, our first syllable, our prefix is unstressed, so the O makes an sound. Now in contrast, there is no schwa. We can clearly hear the short O and the short A. Control, convince, could've, it's actually the VE, the of, right? Which is, we can't see it, but there should be an A in there, right? Because could've is short for could have, so that of takes on a schwa sound. Insult, right here. I guess I do want to talk about this now. In a word like insult and bulge and pulse and result, we have a schwa that is not actually a lazy unstressed syllable. It's just, that's the vowel sound in there. And then should have. So that schwa sound, that most of the time is showing up in an unstressed syllable. It's that lazy tongue sound. But in a one syllable word like push or pull or put or bulge, we have the sound on its own. Same thing in a word like pulse. And then in words like insult, and result. All of those have a schwa. So blue circle equals schwa. You're going to hear a lot more about that schwa sound next year when you get into bigger words with trickier spellings, okay? I do want you to notice for now, though, that schwa sound, which, by the way, the symbol for it is this. That's the symbol for a schwa. It looks like a upside down E, but that sound can be represented with a U and O. We just have the U and the O in this list, but you'll see it with an A, an E, an OU, and AI. So there are many, many different ways to make that sound. For this week, though, just focus on the U and the O. Okay, I keep talking about prefixes. I want you to notice something. The prefix com, C-O-M, means together or with. Now, when you get to page 134, you're going to have some practice with this prefix. You will learn that call, com, and con are all the same prefix. They all mean the same thing. They all mean with or together. But they're known as assimilated prefixes, which means they change their spelling to fit in with the word, right? If you move to a new school or a new country, you're going to try to assimilate. You're going to try to fit in to your new surroundings. So the same thing happens here. When we have a base that starts with L, we're going to use the COL root, okay? Think about it. When something collapses, everything falls in. It all falls together, right? When two things collide, they crash together, right? Again, because our root or our base starts with an L, we're going to use the COL prefix. But when our base starts with a B, we always use M. So when you combine things, you mix them together. L goes with L, M goes with B. M also goes with P. So when you compete, you're fighting with someone, or you're racing or challenging with someone. Okay, so we're going to use the com prefix. When you complete a task, notice again our base is starting with P, so we're going to use com. So when you complete something, you're all finished with it. If something contains, like a box contains a bunch of items, those are all the things that are put together in that box. This time we have a root that starts with T. The T root goes with N, which is why we use contain. Contain or cultain just wouldn't sound good. But they all mean the same thing. When you contrast two things, notice again, our base starts with a T, so we're using the C-O-N. When you contrast two things, you hold them up against each other and compare them. How are they the same? How are they different? Okay? When you control something, again, the T goes with con. When you control something, you are working with it, right, to make it do what you want. When you convince someone, now our base is starting with a V. Well, con works with the V. So when you convince someone to do something, you're working with them to try to get them to see things your way. Okay? So all of these words, collapse, collide, combine, compete, complete, they all have something to do with doing things together or with, right? They all mean the same thing, but that prefix has assimilated, which means sometimes it uses an L, sometimes it uses an M, and sometimes it uses an N. So when you get to this page in the book, you will have to decide. You've got tain, lied, and vince. You're going to have to decide which of these prefixes belong at the beginning. You can use your ear to see what sounds right. You can also use your eyes to see what looks right. L always goes with L. M always goes with B and P. N always goes with T and V. So maybe that will help you. Okay? All right. I also want you to notice that we have a few homophones on our list this week. So let's circle should've and could've. And over here, anything I circled in purple is a, did I say homophones? If I did, ignore it. I meant contractions. So, a contraction, like when you contract your muscles, you pull them together, right? So a contraction pulls two words together. So instead of saying it is, I can pull them together and make the word it's. Now when I pull them together, I lose that I. I have to save a space for it with my apostrophe. Here's how I spell it's. I want you to think of that apostrophe as a bookmark. It saves the space for the missing letter, sometimes multiple letters. So if you look at the word could've, that is really the combining of two words. It's short for could have. Like I could have ordered the shrimp, but I ordered the spaghetti instead. Now when I take could and have and I smush them together, I lose the H and the A. So this little apostrophe right here is really important, and its location is important. It has to go between the D and the V because that's where the H and the A belong, right? So that bookmark, that apostrophe, has to save a spot for those missing letters. Same thing with should have. That's short for should have, right? Like I should have worn my winter coat to the football game because I'm freezing, right? When I take should and have and I put them together, when I contract them, I'm going to lose the H and the A. So I have to save a spot for them right here between the D and the V, between the D and the V. All right, can you think of one more word that would have gone perfectly with could have and should have? Yeah, would have, right? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. If you can spell could have and should have, you can spell would have. All right, so the last thing I want to do is I want to go through our list and just make sure we know what all of our words mean, okay? And I also am going to mark their part of speech. Notice that several words this week will have more than one part of speech. So if we start with bulge, if you stuff a whole bunch of food in your mouth, your cheeks will bulge, right? They'll pop out. So bulge is a verb. It can also be used as a noun, right? He had a bulge in his pocket because he stuffed it with rocks. Okay, so bulge can be a verb or a noun, depending on how you're using it. Collapse is a verb, right? Because if you build a tower and then all the blocks collapse, that is a verb, that's an action. But you can also use it as a noun. We drove by the building because we wanted to see the scene of the collapse, or we wanted to see what the collapse looked like. So if we're talking about a pile of rocks or bricks, things that have collapsed on top of each other, we can call that a collapse. Collide can only be used as a verb. When two things crash into each other, they are colliding. If I wanted to make that a noun, I would have to call it a collision. Combine can also be used as a verb. I combine all the ingredients when I'm making soup, okay? If I wanted to make it a noun, I would have to change it to combination. Compete is also a verb. When you compete in a sporting event, you are trying to win against someone else. The noun form of that is competition. You compete in a competition. Complete, also used as a verb, right? You complete your homework. It means you finish it. You keep doing it until you've reached completion. That's the noun form. Contain is a verb. This bowl contains fresh fruit. So it means to hold stuff, right? The noun form would be a container. A container contains stuff. Now look at this word. Two different pronunciations. If I want to use it as a verb, right? Like I wrote a poem that contrasts winter and summer. When it contrasts those two seasons, it talks about how they're different. I stress the second syllable, contrast. When I'm talking about the contrast, that's a noun. This time I stress the first syllable. There is quite a contrast between my winter wardrobe and my summer wardrobe. My winter wardrobe has all dark clothes. My summer wardrobe has all brightly colored clothes. That is quite a contrast, a big difference. Control is a verb, right? If you're trying to control your guys, I don't know what to call them, the guys on the video game, you use a controller, right? So to control them is the verb. To convince someone is a verb, right? You tell them how they should think. Could have is also a verb, like I could have, whatever. Look at insult. If you insult someone, you say something mean about them, like, oh, your shoes are ugly, that's a verb, right? It's not a nice thing to do, though. Don't insult people, right? Because if you do insult people, they will be upset about your insult. Notice when we're talking about the noun, an insult, we stress the second syllable. That was a mean insult. That was a hurtful insult. That's a thing. Pulse can be a noun, right? You can put your fingers on your wrist and you can feel the blood going through your veins. The doctor or you can count how many beats per minute. That is your pulse. But when you feel your pulse, you are feeling the blood pulse through the veins. Okay, so when you think about something pulsing, think about this. If you're making a smoothie in your blender, instead of having it constantly blending, you might put it on pulse. It'll stop and start, stop and start. That's pulsing. Result can be a noun or a verb, pronounced the same way, right? If you stay up too late, that will result in you missing your bus, okay? Or the end result is you missed your bus. And then should have is also a verb. All right, so lots of great vocab this week. And again, the prefix we're learning is the call, con prefix, which means with or together. All right, that's all I have for you. Good luck, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.